It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
We have Rabbi Aryeh Spero on the line. Rabbi Spero, good morning. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm fine.
It's always great to have you on, sir. I wanted to talk a little bit about, and this has kind of made the headlines, this is a couple weeks ago, but we have this Ilhan Omar. She's taken a lot of attacks recently because she keeps saying things that are ridiculous when she describes the 9/11 terrorist attacks as, quote, some people did something. How do you feel about that?
Well, as an American, I think it's dreadful that we have someone in Congress who so trivializes this event. It's just some things, some people. It's not some people. It was 19 Islamic young men, mostly from Saudi Arabia, doing the work of jihad. And it was done to our country. It wasn't something. 3,000 people were killed. And comes from a woman who has said that America is a hateful and racist place. We took her in. She was a refugee, or she was part of a civil war in Somalia or Yemen, and we did not have to take her in. Not at all. She wasn't a U.S. citizen. She asked for asylum, even though she was not personally being persecuted. She was just part of a civil war. It was a civil war between two different warring Muslim sides. She's Muslim. And we took her in, and she now has said that we're hateful and racist. And she's a person that has terrible things to say about America, and she feels very eager to tell us. And so it's terrible. Listen, in my opinion, she is what we call a soft jihadist. She's not someone who's going to do the actual terrorism, but she insinuates herself into our institutions, tries to demoralize the American people. It's all part of the strategy. Your country's no good. We're hateful. We're racist. And what's happened to your country from the hands of Islam is really insignificant. It's just some people did something. And this is happening all around the world. People of her type come to a country in the West and try from within to demoralize it, condemn it. And what gets me is that the Democrat Party still allows her to thrive. Nobody's kicking her out after all of her anti-Semitism, anti-Americanism, her cavalier, trivializing attitude towards 9/11. And it makes me believe that either they want the Islamic vote so badly that that's more important than the feelings of the average American, or they agree. And I bet you a lot of Democrats do agree if you listen to them.
Yeah.
They think America is a hateful, racist place, and they're glad that she's saying it for them.
Yeah. No, I think she's definitely, and then she's obviously representing, her constituents. She feels like, I mean, this is, in many ways, she's probably heard all these things her entire life, and she's got a lot of people that are voting for her that believe this nonsense. We're talking with Rabbi Aryeh Spero. He's the president of Caucus for America, spokesman for the National Conference of Jewish Affairs, and the author of Pushback, Reclaiming Our American Judeo-Christian Ethos. Now, Rabbi Spero, obviously, over the weekend, we had these what apparently are terrorist attacks coordinated in Sri Lanka. What were your thoughts upon that news?
Well, I figured it was part of the radical Islamic community, and it was. In the name of jihad, Allah, they specifically attacked a church and Christian worshipers on that day. It's all part of the jihad to say that we, the jihadists, our religion is in charge, and that you're infidels and you have to be destroyed. We know that over 800 churches in France over this last year have been vandalized, either burnt, statues have been torn down, broken. It wasn't through the hands of regular Frenchmen. This stuff never happened in France or in Germany until there was this Muslim migration. It's obvious, except to those that don't want to see it because they don't have the stomach. They're afraid to deal with it. They don't want to be called a name. They'd rather the churches be burned, that people be killed. They'd rather see that than have to do something about it. Now, they don't want it to happen, but if it does, they're not going to acknowledge it because they don't want to do anything. They're afraid. Or they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in many situations, people in the West simply don't care. After all, it's just Christians. If a mosque is attacked, my God, they're there in the first second bemoaning it and pointing a finger at Western society. But when Islamic elements do that to Christian sites or to Jewish sites or to Western sites, somehow they accept it.
Yeah.
They have no self-respect.
There's no question as far as the American media coverage goes. The mosque shooting in New Zealand, we heard for at least a solid week, if not more, about the dangers of anti-Muslim bigotry and Islamophobia, and you're certainly not hearing that after the Sri Lanka attacks on Christians.
They don't care. I think it's a very frightening thing when the people of your own country, people in the West, they don't care when their own people are killed or their churches or synagogues are destroyed at the hands of Islam. They feel so little regard for their own religion and their own people. You know what happens in the name of civil rights or human rights or social justice? These people put themselves off for everybody else but their own, because you don't get brownie points sticking up for your own. Oh, you get these virtue brownie points if you stick up for someone else. But then over time, it might start out because of virtue signaling brownie points. Then you end up only feeling something for others, but never for your own people. And we're at a point in Western history here where a lot of the big shots, the elites and the media, they don't care anymore about Christianity, the West. They're demonizing people for being white. Can you imagine? You hear it all the time. You're white this and white that and white privilege. It's bigotry. It's bigotry against the white race or whatever you want to call it. And it seems to be okay.
The Notre Dame Cathedral, I the last I heard, Rabbi Spero, was that they thought it was some sort of computer glitch that caused the fire. Have you heard anything new as to what actually caused this, and do you believe the official story?
Well, you're probably not going to hear the truth right away. While the flames were still burning, the French police said, oh, this had nothing to do with terrorism. How did they know that? There wasn't even an investigation yet. The flames were still burning. How did they know that? They didn't. But they didn't want any possible finger, to be pointed at Islamic terrorists, even though there were threats from the Islamic community to destroy churches, especially on Holy Weeks. As a way to say, you say, we are victorious. Our God, Allah, is victorious over the Christian God or the Jewish God. So I don't know what happened. But I tell you, I think it's highly unlikely that the people in charge of restoring Notre Dame were so unprofessional that what? There was a cigarette, there was a computer glitch. I mean, these people are so careful.
Yes.
When they're dealing with these types of institutions. So, but we weren't even given a chance. So I'm very suspect, specifically because right away they said, it's not arson, it's not terrorism. How do they know?
Yeah, that's a great point. And if you take into account the amount of churches that have been vandalized and fires that have been started in France at churches, you know, you do think you've got to, you know, pursue the facts where they lead. But I'm like you. I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of it because of the Yellow Vest protesters. Now, I think many of them assumed this weekend when they went back to the streets, many of them assumed we're never going to get the full story. But if it actually came out that it was, in fact, arson, I think, you know, it would just inflame the rest of the country and the elites. They're trying to control the people at this point. What do you think the Yellow Vest protesters, Rabbi Aryeh Spero, What do you think they're protesting at this point? They've been doing this a long time.
Well, they're protesting a Macron and a group of elitists that care little about the French people. Macron is a globalist. When he makes decisions, he doesn't care how it affects the common worker in France, the Frenchman. He makes a decision based on his globalism, his transnationalism, how it fits with the world leaders he's impressed with, like an Angela Merkel or some of the other leaders, or how the Islamic community feels about it. That's what's uppermost in his decision-making. This is happening all across the West, where the leaders no longer care about their own native population, their blue-collar people, their workers. They are making decisions based on what makes them look good in a globalist fraternity. And they're just letting their people be passed by as if they don't count. That's what Obama was exactly. He couldn't care less about the American worker, the American people. Hillary Clinton said to the miners, basically, go to hell. We don't want you to do any coal mining in Kentucky, West Virginia, Southern Ohio. You know, we'll put you on welfare, but we're going to regulate your industry out of existence. We don't care about you, your families. The decision was based on this global environmentalism, and people are sick of it.
Do you think the Frenchmen, the yellow vesters, do you think they look across at us and they see Donald Trump? Do you think they're fans of Donald Trump and what he's doing or attempting to do for the American middle class?
I don't know, because they are French. And French have been very anti-American.
Yeah.
And so we can't always say that, hey, those are our counterparts, our buddies over there. If it would be England, I would say that those that are doing that are empathetic and identify with the blue-collar workers here and the middle class here. But it's French. And the French have been notoriously anti-American, and they do things as Frenchmen, which is okay with me. But since Lafayette, they really haven't been our partners in anything.
Yeah, I think you're right. In terms of the way they protest, I mean, there have been people that have been killed, turned to violence and vandalism, and that's just kind of how the French do it. I mean, there's a huge difference between the American Revolution, how that was handled, and then the French Revolution.
No, French Revolution was based on terror, and the American Revolution was based on reason, but. The Yellow Vests have now been infected by a lot of Islamists. They're always there to try to turn over a country. So it started out as something in behalf of the workers in the middle class, but a lot of the jihadists, a lot of the radical Muslim community have joined on in any way they can because they see an opportunity to sow confusion and agitation and misery in a country. So it's not as pure today, the Yellow Vest movement, as it was in the beginning.
Well, I'm glad you put that caveat in because nobody really knows what to think. The American media doesn't really want to cover it at all because if there's even a chance that these people are taken to the streets because of globalism, and the fact is a lot of the French policies are policies that the American media and some, the new Marxists want over here. And so if the people of France start rejecting those policies, and I think that's why you have this blockade of what's going on over there. But let me ask you one last question. We're talking with Rabbi Aryeh Spero. His book is Pushback, Reclaiming Our American Judeo-Christian Ethos. Now, in light of that, I found it just a little bit ironic, Ari, when you had the fire, the cathedral was burning, and the media was so upset. They were putting the coverage out there about what a big deal it was that Notre Dame was on fire, and I just couldn't help but think to myself, wait a second, this is a building that represents a religion that you guys don't want in public life, that you don't like it in any sort of mainstream because you can't express faith in public life, right? That's something that you've got to keep to yourself or keep in your synagogue or keep in your church. Did you kind of see that hypocrisy there a little bit?
Well, Macron never referred to it basically as a religious institution or a church. to him, it was a national monument, a symbol of their history. It's a beautiful place where tourists come to see, and there's a certain pride in that. But he didn't even define it in a way as an attack on Christianity or a church, an attack on our God. He didn't. And that's not the aspect that got him. Actually, they're very secular, unfortunately, in France, and they got a bunch of empty churches that are now becoming mosques. Listen, the country only survives if it has an identity, and religion, that's a good way to identify yourself. And if you don't have it, you're just vapid and naked, and Islam will come in and take over.
Well, and I was looking at that cathedral. I didn't realize this, Aryeh Spero, but, 800 years ago, they used a lot of, French Jews to construct that cathedral, and I believe that's one of the reasons, at least from what I read, that they put the kings of Israel on one side of the building.
It could be. Listen, there were a lot of craftsmen. The Jews probably were involved in building the pyramids back in Egypt. And they were probably, they were good craftsmen.
Yeah.
And but there's a blend of the Old and the New Testament. That's part of Western civilization, the blend of the Old and the New Testament, which, of course, the Quran comes to uproot. Christianity followed Judaism, and Islam really came to uproot it. And any references that they have basically is to rewrite the history. And they're not biblical people. Islam is a Quranic people. In the West, the civilization was made from the Bibles, the Old and the New Testament.
I completely agree, Rabbi Aryeh Spero. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for being on the program. It's always great to have you.
Same here.
All righty.